Born into power but trapped in a body that was falling apart, his life was a slow-motion tragedy. Soft bones, a swollen brain, and a crown he could never carry. Feared, hidden, and ultimately blamed for the fall of an empire, this king's story is a haunting tale of ambition, ignorance, and nature's brutal revenge. Eared as cursed, paraded as a king, and buried without an heir, his body would shatter a dynasty and plunge Europe into war. What doomed him wasn't war or betrayal, it was blood. His own, who was he, and how did his broken body start a war? When the future king was born, silence fell over the royal chamber. What should have been a moment of triumph became an instant nightmare. The newborn was unnaturally limp, his limbs bending without resistance, his head swollen and misshapen. Courtiers stood frozen. The midwife trembled. The queen, seeing her child for the first time, reportedly turned pale and whispered, "God has cursed us." This child, destined to rule an empire, arrived in a body that seemed barely human. His skin was thin and translucent, his cries faint and irregular. When held, his bones felt soft, almost gelatinous, and his skull pulsed with excess fluid. The palace doctors were at a loss. They called it a divine punishment. Behind closed doors, servants spoke of jelly bones and a watery brain. Some said the boy was not born of woman, but forged in sin. Royal expectations shattered in an instant. The dynasty that prided itself on noble bloodlines now faced a disturbing reality. This heir was fragile, malformed, and likely dying. Priests were summoned to perform emergency baptisms and blessings, fearing he would not survive the night. In hushed tones, nobles debated who was to blame. Some pointed to the queen's lineage, others whispered of witchcraft or ancestral sin. But there was no mystery. The child was the result of bloodlines that had been too closely guarded for too long. The price of preserving purity had finally been paid in flesh. This was not a king in waiting. It was a child broken from birth, a living relic of royal ambition gone too far. His existence sent shock waves through the court, a grim omen of the chaos and sorrow that would follow. And yet, against all odds, he lived. For now, the royal family behind this tragic birth was no ordinary house. It was a dynasty consumed by the obsession with pure blood. For centuries, they had sealed alliances not through war, but through marriage, always within their own. Cousins wed cousins. Uncles took nieces as wives. Fathers arranged unions between their own children. The goal was singular: keep the royal bloodline untainted, unspoiled by outsiders. This family's motto was telling: let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry. And marry they did, over and over, within the same shrinking pool of relatives. Generation after generation, the family tree twisted into a closed loop, branches folding inward until the same names appeared on every side. The result was not purity, it was isolation, and it came at a cost. What began as a strategy to preserve power became a genetic trap. Each consanguineous union magnified hidden flaws, recessive genes passed quietly through siblings, aunts, and uncles. Over time, these flaws multiplied. By the time the king was born, his genetic code was a battlefield, riddled with defects inherited from ancestors who had married too close, too often. This dynasty's relentless pursuit of bloodline purity ignored a brutal truth. Nature does not care about royal titles. It demands diversity, balance, and variation to thrive. In their arrogance, these rulers believed their lineage was above such rules. They believed power could override biology. But the king's broken body proved otherwise. He was not just a product of royal ambition. He was a living consequence of it. His deformities were not random misfortunes. They were signatures of a dynasty's downfall, written in bone and blood. The same blood they fought to keep pure had turned against them. The heir they so desperately wanted was the final warning their lineage had ignored for too long. From the start, the child's body betrayed him. While other royal children learned to crawl, speak, and play, he remained motionless in his cradle, silent, staring, and sickly. His jaw, grotesquely enlarged and thrust forward, hung open most of the time. He could not close his mouth properly, let alone chew. His meals were mashed into thin pastes and spoon-fed with caution, as choking was a constant threat. Eating was not nourishment, it was survival. Speech was equally tortured. His tongue, too large for his deformed mouth, struggled to form words. What came out was garbled, slurred, almost incomprehensible. Courtiers leaned in, straining to understand their future king. Often they simply nodded, pretending to grasp what he said. Behind closed doors, they called him mute, though he tried to speak. Walking was another battlefield. His legs, weak and bowed, could not support his weight. At age 3, he could barely sit upright without assistance. At 5, he still crawled. It wasn't until nearly 6 that he took his first steps, awkward, stumbling, and quickly followed by collapse. Each fall risked broken bones, and every injury sent him back to bed for weeks. Illness became routine: fevers, infections, seizures. Each episode left him closer to death. The palace was in a constant state of anxiety. Doctors were summoned regularly, yet none could offer lasting help. Every milestone other children reached with ease became a desperate struggle for him. He was not just delayed, he was trapped inside a body that refused to grow, refused to cooperate. His parents watched in helpless frustration, their dreams of a strong ruler dissolving with each passing year. The child they had pinned their hopes on could barely survive, let alone rule. His fragility was no longer private. It was the court's worst-kept secret. His body was a riddle that baffled every physician. He was tall but frail, his limbs unnaturally thin, his frame bent and contorted. Touching him revealed a disturbing truth. His bones did not feel solid. They bent under pressure, soft like wax warmed in the sun. The court doctors, unable to explain it, whispered that his skeleton was barely formed, his strength more imagined than real. Every movement carried risk. A stumble could crack a rib. A cough could bruise his chest. He often lay in bed, unable to sit for long without discomfort. When he tried to stand, his legs quivered. When he walked, he needed help. His spine curved unnaturally, his joints swelled, and his bones ached constantly. The royal court invested heavily in strange contraptions to support his frail body: braces, padded chairs, and walking sticks carved from ivory. None of them worked for long. Modern medicine has given these symptoms a name: pituitary hormone deficiency. His body lacked the hormones needed to grow strong bones and muscles. Calcium, the mineral that hardens bones, was poorly absorbed, leaving his skeleton soft and unstable. The result was a condition where bones bent under his own weight, a living man with a frame not built to hold him. The pain was constant. He did not play, run, or ride horses like other royals. His world was confined to cushioned chairs and guarded corridors. As he grew older, fractures became more frequent. His body aged, but his skeleton remained delicate, a shell never fully formed. The king's bones, like his destiny, were brittle and incomplete. He was a ruler, in name only, imprisoned by a body that was collapsing from within. The court had hoped for strength. Instead, they watched him crumble, piece by piece. His mind, like his body, was fragile, unreliable, slow, and prone to collapse. As he aged, it became clear that the king's intellect had not developed with time. He struggled to grasp simple instructions, often stared blankly during council meetings, and frequently forgot names, places, and decisions made just hours before. Courtiers avoided asking him questions. Answers, when they came, were confused or nonsensical. Behind the palace walls, doctors speculated. Some believed he was bewitched, others claimed madness. The truth was far simpler and more tragic. His brain was under siege. Swollen and misshapen, his skull seemed too large for his narrow shoulders, the forehead protruding, the eyes sunken. He often complained of headaches, dizziness, and pressure in his head, and then came the seizures. Sudden, violent, and terrifying, these episodes left him trembling, unconscious, and unresponsive for hours. Afterward, he would wake dazed and unable to speak. Physicians of the time had no name for his condition, but modern analysis points to hydrocephalus, fluid buildup in the brain that damages cognitive function and causes seizures. Combined with his genetic disorders, the excess fluid drowned what little mental clarity he had. He could not read or write without assistance. He could not understand diplomatic matters or issue commands without a handler's guidance. Even in private, he required constant supervision. At court, his moments of silence were filled with awkward glances. His rare speeches were met with forced applause. He was king in title, but his mind never allowed him to truly rule. Decisions were made around him, not by him. He was present but powerless, a monarch reduced to a figurehead. His brain, flooded and failing, stripped him of agency. The crown sat on his head, but his thoughts were scattered, lost in water and confusion. In an era ruled by fear and ignorance, the king's condition became a breeding ground for superstition. Unable to explain his deformities or decline, the court turned not to medicine, but to magic. Whispers of a curse echoed through palace halls. Some said he was punished for the sins of his ancestors. Others claimed dark forces had bewitched him before birth. Priests and mystics were summoned regularly, their presence becoming as constant as the doctors. Holy relics were pressed to his head, sacred oils were smeared on his chest. Rooms were filled with incense, prayers, and desperate chanting. None of it helped. Still, the rituals continued. Exorcisms became common. The king was forced to endure them in silence. Holy water splashed on his face, priests shouting at demons that were never there. At times he screamed, not from alliances fractured. Former friends became enemies, armies mobilized, not because of policy, but because one man could not produce a child. His bones, soft and wasted, became the silent cause of tens of thousands of deaths. His death shifted borders, redrew maps, and shattered the balance of power across Europe. Inside the palace, his corpse lay cold, while outside, nations burned. His body had once been a symbol of continuity. Now, it was a symbol of collapse. Leaders invoked his name to justify war, but the truth was undeniable. This conflict was born from royal failure, not on the battlefield, but in the bedroom. The war dragged on for over a decade. By its end, empires had risen and fallen, all because one king's bloodline had run dry. His remains were buried with royal honors, but no heir followed the funeral. His dynasty's ambition had started in marriage beds and ended in war-torn fields. His legacy was not peace or glory, but violence and upheaval. The cost of his body's failure was not just his crown, it was Europe's peace. Centuries after his death, modern science accomplished what royal doctors and priests never could. It uncovered the truth behind the king's suffering. With no need for relics, rituals, or blame, geneticists examined centuries of family records, tracing the twisted web of royal marriages. The results were staggering. The king's inbreeding coefficient, an indicator of genetic similarity between parents, was calculated at 0.254. For comparison, a child born of siblings scores 0.25. He surpassed that. His mother was not only his father's niece, but also his cousin through multiple lines. Every ancestor led back to the same small circle of names. His DNA was a closed loop. This extreme genetic isolation was not random. it was deliberate. The dynasty's obsession with preserving pure blood had sealed his fate before birth. In that purity was poison. Recessive genes, which might have remained dormant in unrelated couples, were forced together repeatedly. Hidden defects surfaced, disorders amplified. The king's body and mind bore the result. Modern medicine has a name for his symptoms: pituitary hormone deficiency, likely compounded by renal tubular acidosis and mandibular prognathism. These conditions explain everything: his stunted growth, soft bones, infertility, and cognitive delays. The jelly bones and watery brain were not curses. They were predictable outcomes of unchecked inbreeding. What superstition once blamed on devils or fate, science now attributes to biology. His suffering was not divine punishment or dark magic. It was genetics, relentless, impartial, and merciless. In seeking to keep royal blood clean, his ancestors unknowingly built a genetic trap. He was its final prisoner. His life is no longer just a royal tragedy. It's a case study in heredity, a cautionary tale about what happens when power tries to outwit nature, and nature refuses to yield. He was born to rule, but never truly lived. Behind the crown, beneath the velvet robes, stood a man stripped of dignity by the very lineage that gave him power. His life was not one of privilege, but of pain, physical, emotional, and unrelenting. Every breath, every movement, every attempt to meet the expectations of his birthright was a struggle. He did not choose his throne. He did not choose the twisted marriages that led to his broken body. He inherited the ambition of ancestors who believed power could defy nature, who thought bloodlines could be preserved like relics, unspoiled and untouched. Their pursuit of dynastic purity forged a prison of flesh and bone, and he was its final captive. In public, he was displayed like a symbol of continuity. In private, he was fragile, isolated, and humiliated. He was mocked by courtiers, misunderstood by his people, and failed by medicine. His mind, fogged and confused, could not comprehend the weight he carried. His body, weak and deformed, could not bear it. His suffering became political. His pain turned into spectacle. The world watched him deteriorate while the court prayed for a miracle that never came. He was not a ruler. He was a reminder of ambition's cost when nature is ignored and power becomes obsession. When he died, the throne did not simply lose a king. It lost a man who had been consumed by the very system meant to glorify him. His life was a slow unraveling of a dynasty's greatest fear: collapse from within. He is remembered not for victory, but for tragedy. His story is more than history. It is a human warning that no crown, no lineage, no ambition can escape nature's judgment. And in the end, it is always the innocent who pay the highest price.